On Valentine's Day, my fiancée Meredith Harlington, who had been studying abroad, suddenly appeared with a tall, handsome man to break off our engagement. Crispin is a renowned international ski instructor. We fell in love at first sight while skiing in Switzerland, she said. "A ink-stained craftsman like you could never understand the speed and passion of skiing." Having just returned from visiting my parents' graves, I asked with reddened eyes, "Does it have to be today?" She clung to Crispin's arm and smirked. "What? Do we need to consult a fortune teller to break up?" I hesitated for a moment before agreeing to the breakup. Meredith threw her engagement ring at my face, but she never expected that I would defeat Crispin in the Mont Blanc Ski Championship in France just a month later. In truth, during her years studying abroad, I had experienced skiing and even more extreme sports long before she did. Later, on her birthday, I married the love of my life. Meredith grabbed my sleeve, sobbing uncontrollably. "Does it have to be today?" Reflecting on the past and present, I smiled slowly and said, "We do consult fortune tellers for weddings. Today is auspicious for marriage." Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. Screech! I slammed on the brakes, pulling the car over to the side of the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The anonymous email's audio file continued to play through the car's Bluetooth system. It was a conversation between Meredith Harlington and her girlfriends, each word cutting into my heart like a knife. "Meredith, you're amazing. Not only did you complete your studies in Europe successfully, but you also managed to snag that internationally renowned skiing instructor of Chinese descent during your ski trip to Switzerland. Talk about killing two birds with one stone, academic and romantic success." "Exactly. I heard Mr. Fordham is incredibly handsome, broad shoulders, narrow waist, six-pack abs. Meredith, you've really scored." The girls chatted shamelessly, their words filled with suggestive undertones. "So, how was Mr. Fordham's performance? Surely he's not all show and no go?" Someone asked in a lowered voice, with a mischievous grin. "Oh, stop it, you're terrible." Meredith feigned indignation, before switching to a boastful tone. "Well, let's just say it was like conquering an advanced ski slope, full of speed and passion." "Wow!" the girls in the recording exclaimed, nearly piercing my eardrums. An invisible hand seemed to clench my heart, making it hard to breathe. Then, another girl inquired curiously, "By the way, Meredith, what about your fiancé back home? You've been engaged for 5 years now. Surely your families are pushing for the wedding?" At this moment, I held my breath, waiting for Meredith's answer. If she still cared for me, perhaps this engagement could still be salvaged. "Him!" Meredith's voice rang out again, this time with contempt. "I've never taken him seriously. We haven't even seen each other in over a year. If it weren't for his father taking a bullet for my dad, why would the Harlingtons ever consider such a modest family as the Quillans? Besides, he's so frail and conventional. The experience with him pales in comparison to Crispin. He's always either cooped up in that ink factory, playing the role of some cultural heritage inheritor, or at my place taking care of my parents. He's nothing but an obedient lapdog, easy to manipulate. Don't worry about him." Boom! Upon hearing this, my mind went into a prolonged state of buzzing. Our childhood friendship, a bond of over a decade, now deemed worthless by her. I clenched my jaw, trying to control my violent trembling as I hit the mute button. Today was supposed to be Valentine's Day, but it was also the anniversary of my father's death. I had just returned from paying respects at the cemetery, my mood already exceptionally heavy. Little did I expect that I would receive such a Valentine's Day gift from Meredith Harlington. Anger boiled in my chest as I started the car and drove straight to Harlington Estate. I had to confront the Harlingtons and demand an explanation, but as soon as I reached the tree-lined road leading to the mansion, I saw a raspberry pink Porsche 911 blocking the way. Meredith Harlington, who was supposed to be in Europe, was passionately kissing a tall man while leaning against the car door, oblivious to their surroundings. The couple was so engrossed in their embrace, even groping each other shamelessly. The scene was utterly sickening. I sat in my car, staring at them intently for a full half-hour. Memories of our younger days together flashed through my mind like a slideshow. Back then, Meredith was vivacious and radiant, like a little sun brightening up my world. She always loved to disrupt me when I was quietly reading, often tugging at my sleeve. She would sweetly call me Brother Giles and drag me off to see all sorts of new and interesting things. Even during our first time together, the usually fearless Meredith trembled nervously in my arms with tears in her eyes. When exactly did that girl from my memories and I grow so far apart, even heading in opposite directions? Tap, tap, tap. A sudden knocking on the window jerked me back from my wandering thoughts. With trembling hands, I lowered the car window, only to see Meredith snuggling up to that tall man. She pursed her lips and said scornfully, "Giles Quillen, you're still such a coward. Don't you even have the guts to get out of the car? Since you've caught us anyway, I might as well save my breath." Although I was somewhat prepared, a sharp pain still stabbed at my heart. I clenched my fists, trying hard to stay calm as I waited for her to continue. Meredith's new lover raised an eyebrow at me challengingly, then planted a loud kiss on her cheek. She let out a coquettish "stop it," before turning to me with an icy stare and speaking. "Giles Quillen, I was too young back then to understand what true love is. It wasn't until I met him that I truly experienced the exquisite taste of love. Our engagement was just our parents meddling anyway. We never had any real feelings for each other. So let's just end it here." She paused, then added, "Let me introduce you. This is my boyfriend Crispin Fordham, an internationally renowned ski instructor. You'll never understand the appeal of thrilling extreme sports like skiing. You're just some stuffy heritage preservation expert reeking of ink." On this day of my father's death anniversary, I couldn't help but recall his dying words, urging me to treat Meredith with sincere love. With a trembling voice and reddened eyes, I asked her, "Does the wedding really have to be called off today?" Meredith hooked her arm through Crispin's and smirked. "What? Do we need to consult an almanac to break off an engagement?" I was momentarily stunned, then nodded while suppressing the tightness in my chest. "All right, I agree to end the engagement." Hearing this, Meredith visibly relaxed, but seeing my calm reaction also left her with an inexplicable sense of disappointment. She quickly pushed aside this odd feeling and pulled out an exquisite antique wooden box from her Hermes handbag. She then hurled it through the car window at me. It hit me with a thwack, immediately leaving a bleeding gash on my forehead. "Here's your engagement ring back too. We have nothing more to do with each other." With that, she turned and walked away resolutely. "Wait!" I called out, ignoring the bleeding cut on my temple as I quickly opened the car door. "Meredith, please return the engagement token my family gave you. It's extremely important to me." Meredith got into the car with Crispin and tossed back without looking. "Oh, you mean that old ink stone? Only you would treasure something like that. Who else would want it?" Then she drove off, leaving behind only the mechanical roar of the engine and acrid exhaust fumes. I wiped the blood from my forehead, the sticky sensation making me even more irritable. In truth, Meredith Harlington had changed long ago, but I'd been burying my head in the sand. She despised the ink smell on me, thinking that I, as an heir of intangible cultural heritage, was old-fashioned and unambitious. She frequently visited various high-end venues, surrounded by a group of glamorous friends. Meanwhile, I continued to guard Quillen's inksticks, the shop my father left behind, improving my inkstick-making skills day after day, determined to carry forward our ancestors' cultural heritage. We had fewer and fewer common topics, while the gulf between us grew deeper and deeper. I just never expected her to be so eager to cut ties with me completely on Valentine's Day, the anniversary of my father's death. In the end, I was too naive and stubborn. My father had been Mr. Harlington's comrade in arms, taking a bullet for him and saving his life. After both were discharged due to injuries, my father chose to promote my grandfather's Hui inkstick-making techniques, becoming an intangible cultural heritage inheritor. Mr. Harlington went into business, building up the vast Harlington fortune. On Meredith's 18th birthday, we formally exchanged engagement gifts. Her family gave me an expensive Vacheron Constantin watch. My family gave her a dragon and phoenix ink stick that my father and I made together, symbolizing a match made in heaven and lifelong happiness. But on Valentine's Day, after our engagement ceremony, my father suddenly passed away. Having lost my mother at a young age, I truly became all alone in the world. Afterwards, while Meredith studied abroad, I took care of Mr. and Mrs. Harlington as if they were my own parents. I wasn't doing this to marry into a wealthy family, but because it was my father's dying wish. In the evening, after finishing a new order of Hui ink sticks for Quillen's ink sticks, I was about to send Meredith a message. I wanted to ask when she would return my engagement gift, but discovered she had updated her social media to announce her relationship with Crispin Fordham. No wonder she insisted on breaking off our engagement on Valentine's Day. She planned to make a high-profile declaration of love on this special day. I smiled bitterly and gave her post a like. Just then, several unread messages popped up on my screen, all from mutual friends of Meredith and me. Giles, weren't you and Meredith engaged for 5 years? What's with that post? Bloody hell. Miss Harlington's gone official? And it's not with you. Giles, mate, you've been cheated on. Go make a scene at the Harlington estate. They owe you. If it weren't for your dad back then, the Harlingtons wouldn't be where they are today. My friends chimed in, feeling indignant on my behalf. Some urged me to confront the Harlingtons, saying they'd surely give me an explanation for the sake of their reputation and the life debt. Others advised me to seize the opportunity, saying Meredith was my best chance to marry into wealth, telling me not to give up easily. Reading these messages, I grew increasingly frustrated, forcing myself to calm down. The most important thing now was to get back that dragon and phoenix ink stick. It wasn't just an engagement gift, but the only Hui ink stick my father and I had made together, holding immense significance. Without further hesitation, I opened my chat with Meredith. Meredith, when can you return the engagement gift? Meredith quickly sent a location, replying, if you want the gift, come here now. I carefully placed the Vacheron Constantin watch back into its box, my heart a tumultuous mix of emotions. This watch, once a symbol of engagement from the Harlington family, now stood as a testament to my own humiliation. The location Meredith Harlington sent was a high-end restaurant, her usual haunt for gatherings with her dubious friends. I felt a twinge of unease, but for the sake of retrieving the engagement gift, I was willing to brave even the lion's den. As I pushed open the door to the private room, the scene before me instantly made everything clear. This wasn't a private meeting at all, but an elaborately set trap. Meredith Harlington and Crispin Fordham sat side by side at the head of the table. As I appeared, the previously noisy room fell silent. Well, if it isn't Meredith's ultimate lapdog. A man with dyed blonde hair sneered, his tone dripping with sarcasm. What's the matter? Come to crash the party now that our Meredith and her man have gone official. Suppressing my discomfort, I looked past the unfamiliar faces to Meredith Harlington. My voice was calm as I spoke. Meredith, this is the watch from the Harlington family. I'm returning it as it was given. I've come only to retrieve the engagement gift my family gave you. Meredith's red lips curled into a smirk, her eyes full of mockery. What's the rush? Now that you're here, why not sit down and join the fun? Crispin, you don't mind, do you? Crispin Fordham grinned smugly, draping his arm over Meredith's shoulders and looking at me challengingly. Of course I don't mind your ex-fiancée. We're all friends here, even after a breakup. Today's a special day for Meredith and me to announce our relationship. Giles can be our witness, right? Witness. I let out a cold laugh, finding the whole situation absurd. Oh, we invite you here out of goodwill, and you're not even grateful? Meredith's eyebrows furrowed, her tone turning sharp. Or do you think you're so important that we should set a separate table just for you? Exactly. There's such a strong smell of ink about him. Even the high-end air freshener here can't mask it. Another woman with heavy makeup dramatically fanned the air, holding her nose. No wonder Meredith couldn't stand you. Always fiddling with those useless things. How could you ever amount to anything? Crispin here is an internationally renowned ski instructor, and he's won multiple skiing championships. He's handsome, sunny, tall, and strong. What can a poor sod like you offer in comparison? That's right. Crispin can take Meredith skiing in Switzerland, diving in the Maldives. What about you? Where can you take her? To your shabby ink shop to smell ink. Each biting remark stabbed at my heart like a knife. Struggling to control my anger, I looked at Meredith again, my tone almost pleading. Meredith, please return that ink stick to me now. But Meredith acted as if she hadn't heard, raising her wine glass to share a toast with Crispin. Amidst the crowd's jeering, Crispin held Meredith close and asked, "Darling, tell me, what's so special about this black, smelly piece of ink? What makes it worth our delicate, unworldly Mr. Quillen coming all this way in person?" Meredith picked up the thread, smiling mysteriously. "Oh, you just don't understand. This so-called dragon and phoenix ink stick, despite its tacky name, it's said to be made by him and his father, specially for the future daughter-in-law of the Quillen family. Quite precious, apparently." This sparked another round of laughter from the group. I watched helplessly as Meredith picked up a brocade box from the table, containing the very dragon and phoenix ink stick. She held it with obvious distaste, as if handling a cheap trinket. Seeing the ink stick treated so carelessly, my heart ached as if a piece had been violently torn away. It was the crystallization of my father's and my efforts, carrying our deepest emotions and the heritage of an intangible cultural art. Meredith Harlington, give me back that ink stick. I could no longer contain myself, my voice trembling with anger. But Crispin took it from Meredith's hand, tossing it carelessly in the bright light, his tone dripping with contempt. "Give it back to you? On what grounds? Meredith, darling, tell me, since when do we return gifts that have been given?" Meredith giggled and nodded, nestling into Crispin's arms, watching the scene unfold. "You!" I was at my wit's end, about to lunge forward and grab it. But Crispin held the ink stick high, his voice icy. "Giles Quillen, if you kneel down and beg me right now, I'll return it to you. Otherwise, I might just let go. Let's see what's more precious to you, this piece of ink or your dignity." At that moment, a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions surged through me. Years of friendship with Meredith Harlington crumbled to dust in the face of her indifference. I only knew that I couldn't let this dragon and phoenix ink stick be destroyed by their hands. As Crispin counted down, with Meredith's indulgence and the crowd's laughter, I fought back tears and slowly began to bend my knee. "Stop right there." A clear, melodious female voice rang out from the doorway. "I'd like to see who dares to bully Mr. Quillen, the ink master, into kneeling publicly." I never imagined that I would encounter a turning point in such a miserable situation. Even more surprisingly, the person who stood up for me was her, Audrey Sinclair, the legendary heiress of the Sinclair family, one of the most prestigious families in Westminster. Everyone in our social circle knew that she was usually low-key and mysterious, and would never meddle in others' affairs. But today she came forward to defend me. After a brief silence, whispers broke out in the private room. "Am I seeing things? Why is the Sinclair heiress here? It's really Audrey Sinclair. Doesn't she despise these kinds of gatherings? Has the world turned upside down? Didn't you hear? Miss Sinclair is here to back up Giles Quillen. Who is this guy to have such a powerful backer?" Amidst the discussions, Audrey Sinclair gracefully walked towards me and helped me up with great respect. "Master Quillen, are you all right?" This title of Master Quillen was not only an acknowledgement of my personal skills, but also a respect for my family's generations of ink-making craftsmanship. I never expected to hear this title from Audrey Sinclair's lips. The Sinclair family was a top-tier aristocratic family in Westminster, with profound heritage and extensive connections. I was merely the heir to an ancient ink-making workshop, a poor boy who had just been publicly humiliated. The difference between us was like that between heaven and earth. Those who had been mocking me earlier now all put on fawning, ingratiating faces. The arrogance on Meredith Harlington and Crispin Fordham's faces vanished, replaced by an almost fearful rigidity. Audrey Sinclair calmly walked towards them, her voice icy. "Please return it to its rightful owner immediately." She enunciated the last 4 words with the authority of someone in a superior position. Meredith Harlington and Crispin Fordham knew well that they couldn't afford to offend the Sinclair family. They immediately packed the ink stick back into its brocade box and presented it with both hands, bowing respectfully. "Miss Sinclair, please don't be angry. We're returning it to you right away," Crispin Fordham stammered, cold sweat already beading on his forehead. Audrey Sinclair glanced at them coldly and said, "Why are you giving it to me? Have you two been abroad for so long that you don't understand what return to its rightful owner means? Or do I need to teach you English personally?" Meredith Harlington and Crispin Fordham were immediately intimidated, shaking in fear and shaking their heads repeatedly. No, we wouldn't dare. We understand. Meredith Harlington quickly turned towards me, still holding the brocade box. She forced a smile worse than crying and carefully offered the box to me, apologizing in a servile manner. "Giles, Brother Giles, I'm so sorry. I was wrong earlier. I shouldn't have humiliated you in public, let alone joke about this ink stick. Here, I'm returning the ink to you. Please don't be angry, okay?" Crispin Fordham also bowed and scraped, with a fawning smile on his face. "Yes, Mr. Quillen, it was all a misunderstanding. We failed to recognize your eminence. Please forgive us this once, sir." The two who had been insulting me endlessly earlier, wishing to trample me into the mud, were now begging for my forgiveness like obsequious dogs. All because of one sentence from Audrey Sinclair, because of the Sinclair family's immense power. I gently took the brocade box from Meredith Harlington and gave her a cool glance. "This ink stick was made by my father with all his heart, meant to be given to my future wife. It carries his endless blessings. So, the person you should apologize to is not me, but my late father. Meredith, I once thought that although you were willful and arrogant, you at least had a shred of kindness and principles. Now I see that I was wrong to mistake a fish eye for a pearl. I hope you never regret your actions today." After saying this, I turned to Audrey Sinclair and said with immense gratitude, "Miss Sinclair, thank you for coming to my aid earlier." Audrey Sinclair smiled gently, a hint of tenderness appearing in her cool eyes. "No need for thanks, Master Quillen. You are an artisan of both moral integrity and superb skill, deserving everyone's respect. Moreover," she paused, her tone becoming meaningful, "I also greatly admire the Quillen family's ink-making craftsmanship. Otherwise, I wouldn't have commissioned you 2 years in advance to create a birthday gift for my mother." With that, she gave me a slight nod and gestured for me to go ahead. We left the private room side by side. Behind us, we could hear the respectful farewells of the crowd. They kept addressing me as Master Quillen, making me feel quite uncomfortable. Just before we exited, Audrey Sinclair, seemingly still unsatisfied, dropped a bombshell. "Miss Harlington, your Harlington family is considered quite prominent in Westminster. I never imagined that the son of a fugitive who illegally raised funds domestically and then fled abroad with the money could bewitch you so completely. I think you must be truly desperate." "What? Crispin, you bloody liar." We ignored the heated arguments sparked by this explosive news and walked out of the bustling restaurant side by side. Snowflakes had begun to drift gently from the night sky. Clutching the recovered ink stick, I bowed deeply to Audrey Sinclair. "Miss Sinclair, thank you again for coming to my rescue earlier." She quickly helped me up, then tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear and gave me a radiant smile. "Mr. Quill, may I just call you Giles? There's no need to be so formal and—" She winked playfully. "Happy Valentine's Day." Her unexpected Valentine's wish made me blush instantly. I stammered out a reply, "Happy Valentine's Day to you too," gazing at this gentle-looking girl with such a spirited personality. I found myself momentarily dazed. For an instant, her image overlapped with that figure from the snowy mountain 2 years ago. "Giles, I didn't drive today. Would you mind giving me a lift home?" Audrey made this request, and I naturally had no reason to refuse. I smiled and said, "It would be my pleasure." On the way back, she eagerly asked, "There's an international skiing competition at Mont Blanc next month. Are you interested in participating?" Her words instantly transported me back to that winter day 2 years ago. It was also at the Mont Blanc Ski Resort in France where I first met Audrey Sinclair. Back then, she was wearing a slightly clumsy blue ski suit. As a beginner, she had accidentally crashed into the edge of the ski slope barrier. I helped her up from the snow and slowly carried her down the winding slope on my back. When we parted, she thanked me warmly with a radiant smile. That's when I noticed, while she looked gentle and elegant when not smiling, when she did smile, a small, shallow dimple would appear on her right cheek, utterly adorable. Later, we exchanged WeChat contacts. When she learned I was an inheritor of the intangible cultural heritage of Hui ink stick craftsmanship, she excitedly placed a large order. Recalling this, I blurted out, "Of course I'm interested." Audrey seemed to have anticipated my agreement. "Then it's settled. See you at the competition next month." She paused, a hint of pride gleaming in her bright eyes. "I've been practicing hard these past 2 years. This time, I'm definitely going to beat you." I graciously accepted her challenge with a smile. "All right then, I look forward to it." Chatting about skiing adventures, we soon arrived at the gates of the Sinclair residences. I noticed her hesitation as she unbuckled her seatbelt before she softly asked, "Would you like to come in for a bit?" My mother is very interested in the ancient Hui ink stick making techniques. She'd love to meet the renowned Mr. Quillen. But thinking of the vast difference in our social status, as well as my troubled past, a sudden wave of timidity and insecurity washed over me. I gave an awkward smile and made up a flimsy excuse to decline. "It's too late today, and too sudden. I'll be sure to pay a proper visit another time." Audrey seemed to see through my thoughts and realized she might have been too hasty. She just smiled gently and said understandingly, "I'm sorry, that was rather abrupt of me. Another time then. By the way, Giles, is that longevity of the pine and crane ink stick I commissioned from you 2 years ago almost ready?" I quickly nodded and replied, "Yes, it just needs one final process. I guarantee it will be completed before your mother's 60th birthday." In the days that followed, to prepare for the Mont Blanc skiing competition, Audrey and I would meet up to practice at the ski slopes in Greater London whenever we had free time. As we spent more time together, I gradually got to know her better. She was truly different from Meredith Harlington. Despite coming from a top family in Westminster's elite circles, she didn't have a trace of the arrogance typical of young socialites. More remarkably, she had an extraordinary passion for Hui ink sticks and various forms of intangible cultural heritage. The appreciation and affirmation in her eyes were like a beam of light, illuminating the gloom deep in my heart. The more time I spent with her, the more I could feel her goodness, and I started to be irresistibly drawn to her. But thinking of the vast gulf between us, I was filled with hesitation and inner turmoil, afraid to express my feelings. Until one day, after our ski practice, we were sitting in a cafe to rest. She suddenly gazed at me tenderly and said with utmost sincerity, "Giles, do you know? The scent of ink and herbs on you is actually more intoxicating than any perfume." And her eyes blazed with intensity. "You are more excellent and more deserving of love than you imagine yourself to be." I was stunned by this sudden confession, unsure how to react. But she just smiled, her eyes crinkling and dimple showing. "If I win against you in the skiing competition next week, could you help me fulfill a wish?" At the French Mont Blanc Ski Championship, Meredith Harlington and Crispin Fordham's smiles froze when they saw me in professional ski gear, standing shoulder to shoulder with Audrey Sinclair at the starting line. Their expressions quickly changed to undisguised shock and mockery. "Giles Quillen? What are you doing here? Don't tell me you've come to cheer us on. Meredith sneered. Crispin raised an eyebrow in feigned surprise, his eyes sweeping over me contemptuously. Well, if it isn't our traditional ink master, Mr. Quillen. What's the matter? Ink business not going well. So you've come to the ski slopes to try your luck. Before I could respond, Audrey Sinclair beside me had already coldly retorted. You'd better mind your manners, Crispin. Giles is here as a legitimate competitor. As for you, try not to lose too badly and end up crying. Crispin's face darkened, a flash of malice in his eyes, before he quickly regained his smile. You jest, Miss Sinclair. I, Crispin Fordham, have never feared anyone on the ski slopes. Some people, though, might not even finish the course. Meredith chimed in. Exactly. Some people are just born to be servants. Yet they try to play at being refined without knowing their own limitations. Humph. I suppressed my anger, unwilling to engage in pointless verbal sparring. Let the race results speak for themselves. The starting gun fired, and the race officially began. I shot off the starting line on my snowboard like an arrow released from a bow. With only the sound of whistling wind in my ears, I had already left Meredith and Crispin's mocking laughter far behind. Years of experience on the slopes, coupled with recent rigorous practice, had vastly improved my skiing technique. High-speed gliding, turning, jumping, every movement was smooth and precise, drawing cheers from the spectators. Crispin, being a professional ski instructor, was indeed ahead of me in the first half of the race. But when he realized I was hot on his heels, even showing signs of overtaking him, his expression suddenly changed. He began to resort to underhanded tactics, deliberately trying to clip my board during turns to disrupt my rhythm. But I was prepared for this. With an elegant sideslip, I easily avoided Crispin's dirty trick. It was he who nearly lost his balance and almost fell. Mr. Fordham, if your skills aren't up to par, don't play dirty. You might just trip yourself up, I said with a cold smile, increasing my speed and leaving Crispin far behind. Audrey caught up, and we raced side by side on the course, chasing each other. Her form was graceful, her technique exquisite. It was clear she had put in hard work over the past 2 years. But as the finish line came into view, I remembered her dimpled smile that day in the cafe. On impulse, I subtly slowed my pace. In the end, Audrey crossed the finish line first, claiming the championship. I followed closely behind, taking second place. Crispin was left far behind, not even making the top 5. Meredith had crashed into the course barriers midway through, ending her race prematurely. Audrey jumped up excitedly, high-fiving me. Giles, I actually beat you. Her eyes sparkled, not hiding her joy at winning the championship. In contrast, Meredith and Crispin's faces were as dark as thunder, looking as if they had swallowed flies. Taking advantage of the moment when Audrey Sinclair was being interviewed by reporters, Meredith Harlington suddenly approached, forcing a stiff smile on her face. Giles, congratulations. I had no idea you were so skilled at skiing. Thank you for the compliment, I replied coldly, not wanting to engage in further conversation with her. Meredith, seemingly oblivious to my aloofness, continued, Giles, I was wrong before. I shouldn't have treated you that way. I never imagined you'd practice skiing so hard for my sake, even defeating Crispin. So, you love me this much, why don't we start over? Fighting back nausea, I immediately interrupted her. Miss Harlington, you're mistaken. I didn't learn to ski for you. I obtained my certificate from the International Ski Federation 3 years ago. During the 5 years you studied abroad, I tried skiing, diving, bungee jumping, skydiving. I kept exploring the world and pushing my limits, but it was all to become a better version of myself. None of it had anything to do with you. Meredith stood there, momentarily stunned by my words. She suddenly realized that she had never truly tried to understand me, her former fiancée. I turned to leave, disregarding her, but she grabbed my sleeve just like she used to when we were children. With reddened eyes, she pleaded, Giles, please don't cancel our engagement, all right? Give me another chance to get to know you, please? Without hesitation, I shook her off, my expression indifferent. Miss Harlington, what we had is over, and there's no possibility of reconciliation. Meredith glanced at Audrey Sinclair, who was still being interviewed, and her tone suddenly turned venomous. Giles Quillen, you don't actually believe Audrey Sinclair genuinely cares for you, do you? She's nothing but a pretty face with a wealthy background. Her private life is a mess, and she's just playing with you. Do you think the Sinclair family would ever accept someone of your lowly status? Only I and the Harlington family are your best option. We're the only ones who could possibly accept you. That's enough, Meredith, I shouted, thoroughly angered by her shamelessness and malice, my voice rising involuntarily. The childhood bond between us was severed by your own hands long ago. Now you're nothing more than a stranger to me. As Meredith tried to persist, Crispin suddenly rushed up from behind. He grabbed her arm and demanded, his tone hostile, Meredith, what are you causing trouble about now? Didn't I already explain my family situation to you? Why are you bothering Giles again? Meredith, wincing from Crispin's grip, fired back angrily. Let go of me, Crispin. It's none of your business. None of my business? Meredith, don't forget who spent a fortune to buy your entry into this competition just to make you happy. And who deliberately targeted Giles to help you get revenge. Is this how you repay me? Seeing the two of them start to argue publicly, I quickly took the opportunity to leave, heading towards the interview area. Audrey Sinclair was chatting fluently in French with the reporters. When she saw me approach, she immediately flashed me a warm smile. At that moment, I felt an unprecedented sense of relief and liberation. Everything from the past felt like a long nightmare. Now that I had awakened, I finally understood what truly deserved my cherishing was this warm and radiant girl before me. I was invited to Lady Sinclair's 60th birthday celebration as Audrey Sinclair's friend. To my surprise, Meredith Harlington was also present. Well, if it isn't Master Quillen, Meredith sneered, her eyes sweeping over me disdainfully. Don't think you've become a swan just because you're attending the Sinclair's party. Do you really believe someone like Audrey Sinclair would be interested in you? Meredith, that's enough. Mrs. Harlington suddenly snapped, glaring at her daughter. Meredith stormed off in a huff. Mrs. Harlington took my hand, her face full of apology. Giles, please forgive Meredith. She's been spoiled. Don't take it personally. She then took out an elegant box from her handbag and handed it to me. Giles, what happened before was Meredith's fault. Please accept this watch we gave you earlier as an apology from the Harlingtons. Mr. Harlington also wants me to ask if you'd reconsider the engagement. I pushed the watch back, firmly refusing. Mrs. Harlington, there's no need to mention the engagement again. Miss Harlington and I have no relationship anymore. Mrs. Harlington's smile froze, her expression turning sour. Just then, the uninvited Crispin staggered towards me with a glass of red wine. He reeked of alcohol, his eyes unfocused. Congratulations, Giles Quillen, on latching onto the Sinclair family tree, Crispin said sarcastically as he approached. I frowned, intending to ignore him, but he grabbed my arm and yanked me. Don't rush off, Master Quillen. I haven't toasted you yet. What do you want, Crispin? I asked coldly, trying to shake off his hand. What do I want? Crispin flicked his wrist, splashing red wine all over me. The crimson liquid stained my silver-gray suit, leaving me in a sorry state. The surrounding guests turned to stare, whispering among themselves. Furious, I was about to react when Audrey Sinclair suddenly stepped forward. She walked to the center of the ballroom, surveying the crowd, her clear voice cutting through the murmurs. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? She took a deep breath and looked at me tenderly. Giles, do you remember promising to grant me a wish if I won the competition? I was momentarily stunned as Audrey continued. Well, my wish is for you to be my boyfriend. Her words caused an uproar. Ignoring the stares, Audrey walked straight to me. She gently wiped the wine stains from my clothes, then took my hand and declared firmly to everyone, Giles Quillen is important to me and the Sinclair family. Anyone who dares to bully him is crossing the Sinclairs." Her voice was resolute and commanding. I stared at her, overwhelmed with emotion. Audrey turned, her piercing gaze sweeping over Meredith and Crispin. "Miss Harlington, Mr. Fordham, you may leave now. You're not welcome at the Sinclair residence." Their faces turned pale, their arrogance deflated as they slunk away from the party. Still dazed, I followed Audrey to Lady Sinclair. She smiled warmly at us, holding an ornate box containing an exquisite, antique-looking ink stick. It was the pine and crane longevity ink I had spent 2 years crafting by hand. "Giles, Audrey told me long ago that she planned to confess her feelings for you at today's celebration," Lady Sinclair said with a kind smile. "This child has been plotting this for quite some time. She commissioned this ink from you 2 years ago, laying the groundwork for today." "Mom," Audrey whined, a bit embarrassed. Lady Sinclair patted her hand and continued addressing me. "Don't worry, Giles. The Sinclair businesses are well managed by Audrey's father and brother. There's no need for Audrey to enter any business marriage. We only want her to choose someone she loves and be happy in this life." Finally, I understood all that Audrey had done for me, quietly supporting and helping me, even publicly confessing at such a grand occasion to back me up. Looking at the blushing girl before me, my eyes grew moist. "Audrey," I said softly. "Yes." She gazed at me tenderly, a hint of hope in her eyes. I took a deep breath, gripped her hand, and said solemnly, "I accept. I'll be your boyfriend." Back on the ski slopes, I had intentionally let her win. This time, I willingly lost to her, lost to love. Amidst the crowd's blessings, Audrey and I embraced tightly. After 6 months of smooth courtship, we finally set a date for our wedding. The big day was scheduled for a crisp October, and I personally went to deliver the invitation to the Harlington estate. Meredith Harlington didn't accept it. Her gaze fell on the wedding date, and she suddenly looked up, her eyes instantly reddening. "Giles, actually, Crispin and we broke up a long time ago. Crispin, he never truly cared for me." Meredith looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "He only got close to me to take advantage of the Harlington family's resources. He even conspired with my best friend to secretly record that audio and sent you an anonymous email, deliberately trying to drive a wedge between us. I'm so sorry, truly sorry. Please, Giles, forgive me just this once, won't you?" I frowned slightly and shook my head. "Miss Harlington, what we had ended long ago." Meredith clutched at my sleeve, sobbing uncontrollably. "Does the wedding have to be on my birthday? Are you deliberately trying to upset me? To punish me?" Hearing this, I paused for a moment, reflecting on the past and present, and couldn't help but smile. "We chose the date based on auspicious days. Your birthday happens to be favorable for marriages." Meredith collapsed onto the sofa, suddenly realizing that her current predicament was entirely of her own making. The wedding day arrived in the blink of an eye, with bright sunshine and perfect autumn weather. The ceremony was set on the outdoor lawn of Sinclair Residences, decorated in an elegant and traditional style. Instead of tacky flowers and balloons, the venue was adorned with various elements of intangible cultural heritage. A subtle scent of ink and herbs permeated the air, refreshing the senses. Guests praised the wedding for its originality and cultural depth. I stood at the end of the red carpet in a traditional groom's attire, my heart racing. Not far away, Audrey Sinclair approached, her face partially hidden behind an intricately designed fan. Though I couldn't see her face clearly, I could sense the joy and happiness in her eyes. At that moment, I felt as if a noble lady from a bygone era had traversed 1,000 years to join me in a lifelong journey. When it came time to exchange tokens, I received a silk box from the officiant and slowly opened it. Inside lay an exquisite, ancient-style ink stick, known as the Dragon and Phoenix Prosperity Ink. "Audrey, this ink stick was crafted by my father and me. It's called Dragon and Phoenix Prosperity, symbolizing harmony and good fortune. It also represents our love, which, like this ink, will endure and never fade. Audrey tearfully accepted it, realizing that this ink stick had finally found its way to its destined owner. Amidst the blessings and applause of the guests, Audrey and I completed our vows. For the rest of our lives, we would appreciate the elegance of calligraphy and watch the clouds rise together.